Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody today to today's webinar, which is focused on construction progress and tracking processes. We'll take a few moments here at the beginning for introductions, but my name is Mike Morneau. I'm a business analyst here at B2W Software. The reason I'm talking to you today is not because of my current role at B2W or my public speaking expertise, but rather my experience in the space of project management and project execution. So for the past 7 years, I'd worked for a construction company which focused on horizontal construction and roadway rehabilitation. I held numerous roles while I was there, from traffic controller to project manager, and then towards the end of my tenure, I helped in the office with resource management and project analysis. So we had hundreds of employees, numerous projects, and many of the same problems which we hope to address today. But enough about me. Also on the call is B2W Software Senior Solutions Engineer, Tom Willey. Tom, would you like to take a moment or two to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure, thanks, Mike. So this is Tom Willey. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer for B2W. I've been with the company a little bit over 10 years. For folks that attend webinars, you know that myself and Mark Hooks, the other Solutions Engineer for the company, we frequently host these. I'll be doing all the product demonstration portions. I had started the company as a product trainer, and I was there for a couple of years. Then I was an implementation team leader, and then back in 2008 became a Solutions Engineer, where I do most of the product demonstrations for the company. So you'll be seeing me doing all the product portion. Also not listed on the screen today is Mark Hooks. Mark Hooks will be running the questions panel. So particularly during the product portions, if people have any questions at all, you are encouraged to go ahead and ask. Mark will be monitoring that questions panel. If it's a niche question or maybe only applies to a very specific area of today's presentation, Mark might answer that question directly to the person who asked it. But if it's a question that has group meaning or is pertinent to everybody, we might also bring it up in the context of the webinar, and either Mike or myself will answer that question. But we do encourage folks to ask any questions along the way, and you'll be seeing or hearing more of me at the product demonstration portion. For now, I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Tom. Now, before we get started, I want to point out that this is the first webinar in a series of B2W Software we'll be presenting. Each webinar will focus on the new approaches of the construction operation geared towards the heavy civil construction industry. So first, I'll be giving a quick overview of the existing project tracking workflows. Next, we'll be discussing some of the technology opportunities that there are in the construction space. And then we'll discuss business challenges that the technology can help to address. And during this portion, like Tom had mentioned, we'll be demoing our B2W products and how they can enhance this workflow to resolve these challenges. So throughout the webinar, we'll take questions that you may have, so please don't hesitate to post your questions, like Tom had said, in the comments area. We'll also conclude today's webinar with a Q&A portion, which we can address any additional questions you might have. So let's get started. On the next slide, you will see a graphic which provides a good summary of the different functions within the construction industry. So whether it's acquiring the work, scheduling and dispatching resources to execute that work, or collecting data from the field or shop, the goal at the end of the day is to share the information and provide clear and current data to each of these functions so that they can be more accurate, efficient, and profitable. On this next slide is a different way to look at these areas, is from where we approach it here at B2W Software. So this graphic shows how each of the previously mentioned functions fits into the different products we offer today within our one solution. All those jobs that have been awarded get pushed over to our operational suite, which we can then schedule for, track against, and maintain and inform on. The next slide is a good look at the project progress management workflow. So typically most projects will float left to right between these columns from pre-construction to project closeout. But along the way, the data will need to bounce up and down on this page between the office, field, and the shop. So the office, we're concerned about cost management, payroll, and earned value on a project. In the field, we're concerned about progress tracking, resource utilization, and project execution. And of course, can't forget about time cards. And the shops, of course, want to know what's broken and what can I fix before it breaks. So again, today we're going to show a little bit of the estimating and bidding portion of this workflow, and we'll talk about how this information can be used on the equipment management side of things. But the majority of the time will be spent in the field. So the next slide here will show some of the challenges within this workflow. So first of all, the disconnect between estimating, operations, and accounting data can make the information inaccessible to certain users in the field or even in the office. It can also cause the user to re-enter information from their estimate into either their time cards or scheduling solution, or possibly even both. So along those same lines, manual time entry can be laborious and error-prone. Incorrect cost codes, employees using the wrong numbers, the hours just don't add up. There's a lot of errors that can happen along this process. So ultimately, both of these challenges result in the same problem, which is a lack of timely, consistent project data, which at the end of the day could result in poor or misguided business decisions, which will probably impact the outcome of the job. So this next slide here will show how technology fits into all this. I'm just going to skim over these opportunities because I don't want to steal too much of Tom's thunder, but ultimately it boils down to these three buckets. Unification between the systems, which can help you manage all aspects of the workflow and help with the timeliness and accuracy of the information within the systems. Then there's the web and mobile technology aspect, which will empower the field employees that use them. And then it can also automate the normal day-to-day functions which they're responsible for. Lastly, the ability to data mine this information from all aspects, from how the work was bid, how it was scheduled, and how it was executed. All this will allow for better business decisions. So technology helps to do that, and it helps to do it in real time. So on the next slide, before the piece of equipment arrives on site or the first time card is submitted against a job, there's a series of challenges which present themselves to the business. So how do I acquire the job? How are the different aspects of my business going to view this estimate? Can I provide this information in a format that's relevant and to the point for each part of my company? And also, how can I enter this data in once and not have to recalculate or rekey this information into my schedules, time card, and accounting system? So Tom, do you think you could show how we can address these challenges with the B2W software solution?
Yep. So what I'll do now is I'll kind of leave the world of PowerPoint here, and I'm going to show you in our product suite some of those workflow challenges and opportunities that Mike was describing. So I'm going to go into the B2W estimating piece. And what we're going to talk about is how the system can help companies to adhere to those standards, how it can take a lot of that burden off by letting you take the estimate, and rather than having to manually rekey or recalibrate the estimate, simply push the data out of the estimating system and off into other applications, as well as the ability to take that estimate and let people in different parts of the company, like accounting or operations, see the same estimate. Again, inside the estimate itself here, this is our estimating piece. I'm not going to spend too much time in this program. I'm really just going to focus on the pieces that touch tracking. So I'm going to start by showing how you can set up these kind of standardized templates. So there's a whole host of resource cost level information, but also these item databases. And what it allows companies to do is set up standardized templates that represent how they think about costing things. So as a very simple example for utility or site companies that do a lot of excavation, I might frequently quote out excavation, and I can create a template for my estimators to use that they can simply copy out of this database of items into an estimate. And this template can be preloaded with all of the details needed underneath. So to quote out common excavation, I have things like an excavation crew and or trucking. So I can pre-populate it so that when the guys go to make an estimate, they're pulling from a predictable, standardized set of costs. Now they'll be able to modify this to make it estimate specific, but I kind of know the starting point that they're going to pull from. Now these templates can be as simple or as detailed as you need them to be. So this is a very simple example for companies that do more complex, nuanced work. Here's an example where I might be quoting out trench excavation, install pipe, and backfill. That might be a standard line item I quote out by the linear foot. But if I look underneath that, I need to break it out into the different steps to achieve that goal. So there's excavating the trench, and there's an excavation crew cost for that. Then there's installing the pipe with a different crew and all of my materials. So again, you can build these standardized buckets, and it does a number of things. One, it makes it more standardized. You know where you're starting from when you build an estimate. You know what costs are going in. But it also speeds up that process. They don't have to reinvent the wheel every time they create an estimate. They just pull the information in, and a lot of work is done for them. The other piece to this that's going to become important later is this concept of something called a job cost ID. Now that's a B2W term that essentially means accounting codes. So as part of our system, not only can we store your company's specific costs to do work, we can also store accounting codes that are embedded into our templates. And so that dramatically speeds up that process. When I create an estimate, I'll be able to take the estimate and simply send it out to accounting, where I don't have to re-enter that information to my accounting system. I can import a budget. You'll also see how these help to drive the operations side. They're going to end up creating the buckets of cost that you choose to track. And these codes could be placed either on an entire item, or they could also be placed down here in the different aspects themselves, the different subcomponents, if you will. So each one of these tasks or crews or materials could all have their own accounting code or job cost code. So those are kind of how the pieces are put into place and how you can create these standards. What that equates to, I'm going to go back to the home page, and I'm going to go inside of an example bid that I've created. So this is now an estimate inside the system. You'll see these different tabs along the top of the page. So estimators can pull in their cost components, and they can build out a list of line items, and they can come pre-associated with all those costs. I could simply say that I want to add items. So if I said, for example, that I wanted to add a pay item, I could now access any of those templates, and they would come in with all those costs. So I've brought in my templates, I've put in my quantities. It's also brought in those job cost codes. So really a whole bunch of information has come in a standard way, and I don't have to rebuild it from scratch. But what I can now do with that is I could walk through the process. There's a lot of time saving and efficiency factors inside of the estimating system. But if we just look at the pieces that touch when you're tracking a project or how to help other parts of the company, you have really two different ways of doing that. One is to export data out. So I can actually go and take an estimate and say I want to export it out and send it from our system to other things like accounting. So you'll see Sage products here. These are all different exports that we could send out to. Viewpoint, Dexter and Cheney, Computer Ease, Maxwell products. So the whole host of other systems that we can feed, we can also send it to scheduling systems. So Microsoft Project and Primavera for project managers or other production staff that need to turn the estimate into a schedule. They don't have to manually rekey all that data. They can simply move it out of our system into those other systems. We also let you take the information in the estimate and quickly present it to other people in the company. So again, I might be looking at this in one way as an estimator, but I might need to get information out to 5 other people in the company in different departments, and they all need different things. Without an electronic system like that, it could be a lot of manually cobbling together information from my estimate in Excel or something like that. With B2W Estimate, I could simply come up here and print a number of reports. So if I'm done with this estimate, but I need to tell the purchasing department what materials I'm going to need and what quantities, I could just bring up a report. For example, this material summary report. And I'd be able to see all the materials in the estimate, the quantities, the total quantity of each material, and the cost of that material. I could even print out a different report that would show what vendors I'd selected and the vendor cost for each one. Or I might not need to do that. Maybe I'm going to send more information over to operations about our resource commitment. So they need to know for this job that we've just won, what are we looking at in terms of resources? I could do a cost component summary where I'd be able to show them all the crews we're going to need and the total amount of time we'll need them for, all the labor types we're going to need, all the equipment types and total hours for those. So it's just a different way of slicing and dicing all the data inside the estimate. Another pretty common one that people like is this one down here called a work order report. So this allows me to essentially share the entire structure of how I bid this estimate, but it doesn't have any sensitive cost information in it. It shows all the items, it shows all the cost codes people have to bill their time on, the quantities, production rates for crews, materials, everything that a foreman or project manager would need to know about the job, but I simply push it over, and they could even bring that out into the field because there's no sensitive cost data. So being able to reformat data and just send it where it needs to go is pretty important. The last thing that we'll show you here in this estimate really is a way of dovetailing over into the operations side is how I can now take this estimate and simply set it up inside of the operations database. So if I've won this job, I've sent it over to accounting, I've given the people all the reports that they need, now what I'm going to do is move it over to our operations platform where dispatching and tracking and maintenance can all use that job. So it really keys in around these job cost IDs. This is the other kind of aspect we were describing that Mike was talking about, how you might want to look at an estimate differently. So estimators might see it in terms of these pay items, what they have to quote out to the owner, but the level of detail I might need to track a job could change dramatically just depending on the company or the requirements. So what I'm going to show you is just how easy it is to take an estimate like this, flip a couple of toggles, and get two completely different jobs over in the operations side. So I'm going to take this B2W operations example bid, that's the name of the bid itself, and I'm going to push it over. And what I've basically told the system is, in my case, I said consolidate like cost codes together. So I'm going to move out of the estimating system, and just as a quick introduction, this is the B2W operations platform. So we're really going to focus all of our time today on track, but as Mike described, there's other elements you need to be aware of. There's a dispatching piece for moving and scheduling of resources like employees and equipment. There's also a heavy equipment maintenance and management module, and all three of these elements are using just a single SQL database under the covers. So when you saw me push that job over, everything that the operations platform needs has been set up and is in one central area called jobs, and track and dispatch and maintain can all use that job information now. Similarly, if I start to add employees or other resources that operations are going to need to carry out the daily functions, I don't add that information in three separate places. If I add a new piece of equipment, I simply add it to the operations platform, and then any of the elements that I own can see and use that piece of equipment. And the elements share data with each other as well. By creating a schedule in dispatch, I can push that to become the time card. From the field tracking piece, or what we call a field log, I can send repair requests that go to maintenance. Piece of equipment gets brought down for maintenance, that's visible in dispatch. So a tremendous amount of efficiency in terms of where data is and how you can use it. With all that being said, I'm going to go to the jobs area and show you that estimate that we just pushed over. So when I exported that out, again, I don't have to set all that information up manually. We just move the estimate over, and it creates a host of information. There's general information, and then there's these estimate items. So again, I had an estimate that had about 8 pay items here. And I told the system, well, hey, consolidate that down. So use those cost codes and make fewer buckets. So when I go into tracking accounts here, I'll see that 8 items became just 5 buckets of cost. And there's all the excavation, all the concrete, and all the pipe. So that's one way of essentially telling the system to bundle up these cost buckets. And those are what the guys in the field will see to put their time and their consumption of materials against. They'll be able to say, this is how we're doing against all the concrete in the bid or all the excavation. But that's just one way of doing it. To show you what I mean here, I'm going to delete the job in operations, and then I'm going to go back into the estimating system. I've got literally the same job here, but I'm going to go into the background and make 2 changes. And these changes essentially affect the way I package up the data and send it to operations. So I'm going to say, don't just group it by that cost code or account ID. Include the item and the description as well. And then I'm also going to say, you know what, I want you to use descriptions that come from the estimate, not the descriptions that are associated with those codes inside of operations. Now don't worry too much about what I'm doing here. The reason I show you this is because with just those 2 toggles, now when I send the job over, I'm not getting 8 items that go down to 5 tracking accounts. I'm doing the reverse. I'm telling the system to take all the detail out of the different items and set it up in a different way. So now when I go over to operations and I look at that job, the 8 pay items have split out to become 13 tracking accounts. So each company can not only choose the level of detail they want, do they want a lot of detail, or do they want less detail to make it maybe simpler for the guys in the field to choose what they're going to have? But you get to make that choice, and it's very, very simple. You just make a few toggles, and the system does all the math for you, so you're not manually recalibrating all of that information. So that's a pretty good spot for us to stop and go back to Mike and talk about some of the different workflows that we have. So Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. So we just saw how estimate can help structure our bid, provide reports and data to the operations side of the business, but that opens up a new series of challenges that we'll need to address. So as operation begins work, we'll need to look at how we can provide this bid information to the field so that they can understand this and decide how they want to act upon it. We'll also have to look at how we can remove steps from the field data collection process so we can make the information easier to enter, access, and analyze. Lastly, how can we improve communication between the office and the field staff? So, Tom, could you walk us through how the user can take these next steps on the operations side to use this information? So, we'll need to start collecting data against that job that we just won.
Absolutely. So, these workflow challenges here, these are really addressed by the track piece of it, which is the majority of what we're going to spend our time on. So, I'm going to go back into the operations piece. You've already seen that I could now set up that job. So those challenges and opportunities that Mike described are about making it nice and simple for the guys in the field to capture what they need, reducing those barriers to adopting new technology, and getting real actionable data very quickly. So once the job is set up, the guys would go out into the field, and they would be able to use something called a field log to capture their daily activities. So this is really the main piece that the field uses to record what they've done. So I'm going to go and create a field log. And when I go through that process, we're going to see quite a few things that are going to help out. So when I click Create Field Log, one of the first things we'll see is that they have an opportunity to simply copy information. So unlike a paper field log where they might have to write in everything every day, it's electronic. So I could actually tell the system, we'll take yesterday's field log and copy it with today's date on it. They still have to fill out the hours and the quantities, but it lets me recuperate yesterday's work. Or if I owned other pieces of the operations platform, I could even tell the system to pull any assignments that were given to me on the dispatch piece. So if a scheduler or dispatcher drags and drops a crew or new equipment or employees, that's just going to show up in my electronic field capture. So I'm not going to do that though, because we're really just going to focus on track today. So I'm going to say just copy my last field log. So when I click Next, this is going to put me into, again, what we call a field log, your daily data capture. Now, as I'm going through this process, keep in mind that for the most part, the entire operations platform is browser-based. So what you're seeing me do here is something that someone could do from a laptop. So you can use a laptop and a browser and an internet connection to fill out their daily log. But once I'm finished with this log, I'm also going to show you how they could do that from a tablet. So one of the other ways that we help reduce that technology barrier is we give you different methods how they could fill out that field log. So I'm also going to show you how we could do the same thing from either an iPad or an Android device. It's all the same for us. And those devices can be used without an internet connection. But just looking at the field log capture as it is, this is an example of a field log. So I have a number of different sections of information here. I have a general information section. I have a place to capture the job or jobs that I worked on. I have a place to capture the quantities or production accounts. And then if I scroll down, I have a place for employees, equipment, materials, and subs as well. Now, this is a great amount of information, and a lot of clients want to capture exactly this, but also a lot of people tell us, you know what, that's just too much for me and my guys. We don't capture that much information, and I think having them fill out so much information would probably be a barrier, be too much. So we provide a lot of flexibility where each company can choose how much of this information they want to use. So you can take your company and carve it up into what we call business units. You can have different layouts for the field log in each business unit, but what it means is regardless of whether you have one business unit or three, you can choose what you want to have shown on the field log by business unit. So one of the choices that you have is you can turn sections of the field log on or off. So if you're not going to capture subs or materials or trucking, you just turn those sections off so that the guys don't even have to see them. Or you can also turn off fields or different columns within each of the sections. So if you didn't want them to take notes on every single thing, you can make that column disappear. They don't have to. You can also change the name of sections, change the name of individual fields. You can even create your own custom fields anywhere on the field log. So these things here, like AM weather and PM weather and safety topics, I just made those in the system. And all of these things that I'm describing, the changing of the field log layout, adding fields, taking them away, that's not something that a computer programmer has to do. That's all done within the user interface, and we train clients on how to do it. So you essentially have complete control over what the guys in the field fill out. And as an example here, I'm going to click on this drop-down for business unit. I'm going to move to a smaller business unit here called the short field log. And when I do that, you might have noticed on the side the bar drops, and that's because I essentially turned off a whole bunch of sections. So I might just start out capturing quantities, employee hours, equipment hours, and that's it. I don't need my guys to fill out materials or subs or anything else. But you get to choose that. And you might even start with employees and then add other sections later on. Looks like there's a question here. When are we going to be able to report off of custom fields? Well, the short answer is you can today. So what that caller is talking about there is that in the program there are many reports that you can use within the system, and they key off a lot of the fields that are here. If you create a custom field, it is available in the database. You would need to create a custom report to take advantage of it. But today, you can actually access any of the fields that you create as part of reports. It's just that because a custom field could be anything to anyone anywhere, there's really no way that B2W could predictably build a report that would make use of any field that you can think of. That would be something done through custom reports. But it can be done today, and we'll be happy to give you some more information about that offline if needed. So good question. I'm going to switch us back. I'm going to let us fill out a little more information, but we feel that's really important that companies can choose how much they give to their field to fill out, and they can choose that level of detail and when. I'm going to go back to the larger field log, and now I'm just going to start to fill it out. So I might start here with my production quantities. Again, those are essentially the tracking accounts that we talked about. And remember, you can choose how many tracking accounts you end up with, the level of detail. I'm just going to say 300 cubic yards of excavation and 50 feet of pipe. Then I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to fill out the hours for my employees. Now, as we're filling this out, we'll talk about this as another big advantage later. But by filling this information out for employees, I am going to be able to reuse this and send it over to drive payroll. And we'll talk more about that in the third segment of the demonstration. But I'm going to enter in hours here. Track has some pretty powerful error checking, so if I were to put in the wrong number of hours, or if a person was on 2 field logs on the same day and time, I'd be able to catch that kind of information. We trap it as an error. Also notice when we talk about feeding information to other parts of the company, down in the equipment section here, if I had the maintain element, I would also be able to fill out equipment meter readings, and those meter readings would be able to kick off preventive maintenance programs. So maintenance would have a much more accurate sense of when certain predictable maintenance routines need to be performed, because they could be keyed off of an odometer or engine hour meter or even the passage of time. And these meter readings that the field enters could be entered in daily and compiling when things need to be performed and maintained. They also have the ability to send in a repair request. So other than entering in meters, a person in the field could actually say, I have a problem with this piece of equipment, here's what it is, and send that directly to maintain. So again, helping to reduce the friction that data has to go through to get from one part of the company to the other. Data just flows freely from one area to another. So I've entered in my employee hours, my equipment hours. I'll come down here and put in my materials. And now when I click save the draft or save and submit, I'm going to get immediate performance feedback about how I perform. So the system is doing error checking, it's compiling all the data, and then what it's going to do is produce a graph to kind of show me, up close and personal, how did I perform today as a foreman. So I can see here a performance summary based on my field log quantity. And what it's telling me is specifically for the work that I performed, here's the estimated values for labor and equipment and cost, and then what I field log and what the variance is. Now, you control this as well. A lot of people don't want to share cost with the field. That could be turned off, and you just see your productivity, if you will. But again, it's letting people be part of that equation to say, this is what we needed you to do, this is what you actually did. And in many organizations today, that information either doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it has to be manually cobbled together, which is hours of someone's time taking those paper sheets, putting them into Excel or some other tool, or they have to get this from the accounting system, only after payroll posts, which means the data is days or weeks out of date. So with a system like B2W Track, all those things go away because the same tool that you're using to fill out for payroll also gives you that performance feedback. And then when I'm ready, I could even submit that time card, and that would essentially let someone else within the organization review that time card and look at it for errors. And again, we'll look at some more information about that when we go and do the third segment of the demonstration. But what I'm going to show you now is the same basic information but from a tablet. So here's field log 13389. What I'm going to do is on my side, I'm just going to bring up a little application called Air Server. So it's a third-party app that's going to let me reflect my iPad on screen. If we're all very lucky. It's a little bit temperamental at times, but it looks like it's responding today, which is good. So hopefully you folks can see that now. This is an iPad that I have right in front of me, and I'm simply reflecting my screen onto my laptop screen so you can see it as part of the GoToMeeting. But if I turn my iPad sideways, you'll see it reorient itself, that type of thing. And what I'm going to show you is, just as I mentioned before, we have a mobile app that you can download and install on either an iPad or an Android that will actually give you all the same capabilities. Oh, it looks like I have another question that came in. How do you deal with work that is completed on time and materials? That's a really good question. I'll actually be able to show that to you inside the tablet. But the short answer is we do allow you to parse out time and materials work to be treated differently than estimated or production work. And the less short answer is you can actually store, as part of a job, you could store time and material rates, so the actual billable prices that you would charge for an hour of each type of labor or each type of equipment, or the marked up rate for your materials. And so when you're recording hours and time against T&M, you can actually produce a bill from the field that's separate from the cost that you're putting against for the estimated work. I'll see if I can squeeze that in as part of the demonstration. But just so you can see here, again, the tablet can perform completely disconnected, so it has its own local data store. There's no internet connection required. I could be at the bottom of a well and still be entering in field logs. I'm going to open up that tablet, and I'm simply going to log in. I'm going to put in my PIN, and then it's going to give to me a list of all the field logs. And you can see 13389 is already synced down to the tablet. So I can simply go into that field log, and you'll see on the left-hand side of the page, I have all the same information. So it's a slightly different form factor, but it's basically optimizing it for screen size here, and I can do all the same functions that I can on the browser with a couple of really important, nice extra features. So just little things like I can turn sideways and it reorients itself, and you'll see it even pushes the tabs off so I have more space. I can still see everything in one continuous sheet, so just like I have with the browser version, I can go down to this little review tab at the bottom, and I can simply see everything all in one go. There's all my employees, there's all my equipment, all my materials. And I could go in and add to anything I want. In fact, if I go to a production account on the left-hand side here, I could even enter in one screen the quantity and all the hours for employees and equipment. So a few space-saving design aspects. Also, you get some extra benefits just being built on a tablet itself. So again, to reduce those barriers for technology and to make it even easier for people, not only is it just optimized for touch, 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 tap, but I can also leverage other technologies on the tablet, like, say, for example, Siri. Now, Siri does require internet access. That's just the way it works. But if you did have internet access, you could actually go to a place that you would normally type stuff in, like, say, notes. And rather than typing it in on the keyboard, field staff can just click on the microphone or tap on the microphone and speak in their information. So they could say, this guy showed up late and did not have a helmet. And then Siri will do that translation so that they don't have to do all that typing. And then I can save those notes, and it's much more likely you're going to get more detailed information because nobody likes typing. It's just the way it is. So I can do things like that. I can also attach from the camera. So if I'm out in the field and I need to capture some site conditions, I can actually just tap Add from camera, and this is where you'll see my kind of messy desk environment that I work in here, as well as our webinar. and I'll just take a picture and use that photo. So super easy for guys to either capture site conditions to prove things were the way they were when they left, or maybe some kind of accident information. And then at the end of the day, they get the same type of performance feedback. So if I go to the summary screen, I have a nice, simple to read graph. Red is bad, green is good. Give it all the same information, just in a slightly different format. It's much more optimized for touch. As a very, very brief aside here, I'm going to quickly just give a visual answer to that question about T&M. I'm going to go to another field log. This will be very quick just to keep us on track for time. But here's a field log where I have a section for time and materials turned on. So again, remember how you can change the look and feel of the field log? Well, whatever I do on the browser, that would also replicate to the tablet. So you have one layout. When you change a business unit, you're going to get the same information on the browser as you are on the tablet. But what I can now do is I could go to a time and materials section, and I could put in information for employees. I could say how many hours they've worked on, etc. And now, because it's on a tablet, I could actually come up here and say that I want the owner to have to sign a T&M report. And then it would produce a bill for the finished time and materials work that I did today, 5 hours at $49 an hour, and there's the total price. And so right from the field, I could actually give the tablet to the owner, and then they could sign off on the work. And that T&M signature is stored as part of the field log, and it could even be emailed directly to the owner and or somebody within your organization. So again, making it way easier for information to move from the field to the office, no more waiting for paper at the end of the day, and no more lost pieces of paper that are no longer accessible because they flew out the window or something like that. So that's a good overview of the tablet. Got a little bit over there, but hopefully that's shown you how you can start to get information to the field, make it easy for them to fill out, and then they get that immediate performance feedback. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike, for our third and final segment here.
All right, so yeah, we just saw how we can customize the data that we're collecting by setting it up on our time card. Also, how we're given immediate reporting on that data so they can ask themselves, why are my labor hours high or low? Am I overstaffed? Did the estimate miss the additional resources needed? Those are all questions that can be sparked from these daily reports that they've received. And then lastly, how can we leverage mobile technology to enter time, capture images, submit time cards without scanning, emailing, or faxing? So that was a real good recap of how we can collect all that information from the field. But now that we've begun collecting all this data, we need to look at the next set of challenges in regards to managing that process. So how do I get actionable data from those time cards as a supervisor? Whether it's a one time card or 100 time cards, how do I digest all that data without dumping it into a spreadsheet or writing it out on a pad of paper? And how do I get payroll the information they need so my employees get paid? So Tom, can you show us how this all comes together at the end of the workflow?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm going to leave the world of PowerPoint again. I'm going to go back into the actual operations piece. So one of the other big benefits of the system is it doesn't matter if you're using a browser or if you're using the tablet app. All the information comes to the same place. So this is now, again, avoiding all that hassle of paper, going to and from the office and waiting for days to see stuff come in. I either submit my field log on the laptop or submit it on the tablet and sync it to the office, and it's there. So I can now go and view field logs. Now keep in mind, too, there's a lot of permissions and security in the system, so you can essentially control who has access to this. But it means that someone above the foreman or project manager could essentially go see if somebody submitted a field log, and then they can simply open it up and check it out. So I open the field log up. Notice that I have access to that picture that we took and anything else like the notes, all the information down at the bottom. And then I could look at it, and if my permissions allow me to, I can either approve or reject or even edit the field log. So again, there's sometimes collaboration that has to go back and forth. You may or may not know all the information. I call the foreman. If he's got a piece of paper, I have to wait for him to change it, resubmit it, white out. If I'm allowed to, I can simply edit the field log and make changes right on screen. Or if you really do need that person to make those changes because that's your business process, you could simply reject the field log and put in notes about why you rejected it. and then the foreman would very clearly see his field log was rejected, and he could potentially access those notes. Now, whether I make the foreman fix the mistake or whether I fix it myself, once that has gone through the proper approvals, I could then say, yep, this field log is good to go. So I'm now going to approve it. Then I have another spot, or really the same spot, where I could look at all my field logs, and I could make use of that information we've captured and export it out. So this is where I could now take these field logs and use them to drive payroll, but I could also use it to send a lot more important information over to the ERP. So I have a whole bunch of field logs here. Now this could be hundreds of field logs from a large company over a given week. I don't have to take that and manually put it into the ERP system anymore. I can just say I want to export those field logs out. So it's going to show me only the approved field logs. So as a payroll person, I could grab an entire week's worth of payroll if I wanted to, or a single day. Oh, it looks like there's another question that came in. Can you have more than one approval? Like someone approves, then a superintendent approves after that, the general foreman approves. So the answer is yes, you could. There's 5 statuses of a field log. There's draft, submitted, approved, rejected, and transferred. And so most people will just take a field log when it's ready for someone to look at it, they'll submit it, and the next person either approves or rejects. Other people will take those first 2 statuses and they'll kind of split them up. So they'll do all their field logs in draft, then maybe a general foreman might look at it and say, yep, I'm going to submit it. And he's kind of the first level of approval. And then once it gets past the general foreman, a second person will come in and then approve it or reject it. So you're just making draft a status that you can use, then approving it after that. So you can have 2 levels of approval. Good question. So I'm going to take some field logs here. I'm just going to take this one. But again, to be clear, you can grab all the field logs and export them out at once. And then when I click Next, it's going to give me a number of options. Now, it's doing this because it's a sample database that's set up to go to a number of things. I just wanted you to see that you have the ability in our system to export out to many different accounting applications. Again, all the Sage products, Viewpoint, Maxwell products, Dexter and Cheney, Computerese. So we have a whole host of exports, and this isn't even all of them, that allow you to take the information from the field log and send it out. Now, I think we mentioned earlier, and other important information beyond payroll. Well, we have the ability to take anything from any part of our field log and make it part of the export, including, by the way, custom properties. So it's possible for us to take custom properties that you created and simply make them part of an export. We do that out of the gate for Viewpoint simply because Viewpoint has the ability to take that in. But really, our only restriction is what can the other system accept? And to just show you what I mean here, we've even included an export that covers us if we don't already have an export. And it's this one here called Standard. So many times an accounting system we've never heard of has the ability to import from a CSV. So we've included a standard export that essentially takes all the data from a field log and puts it into a CSV file or a series of CSV files. So I'll show you what I mean here. This is the export file. So each section of the field log has all the information needed. So there's for my employees. I could use that to drive payroll. I could also send over equipment for job costing purposes. I could also send over material utilization. I can send over tracking accounts or quantities. So if another system can make use of these, we can already export them out. And it wouldn't matter, in my case, I exported 1 field log. But if I exported 300 field logs, I'd just get 1 file for each section, so I could move everything over all at once. So it makes it very simple for you to use one easy-to-use system like ours with that nice, flexible, simple field log. You can use that as your primary data collection, and then you can just move it over to accounting. The last piece of this that we'll show, in addition to payroll and moving out to ERP, is the other real gem, which is that real-time reporting, that kind of actionable data. So you've already seen that inside of a field log, I could get a dashboard that says how I, as a foreman, did. But all of those field logs roll up. So I could go into a job, and our system provides out of the box these different dashboards and reports to help summarize information and let you see what's happening on a job so you can see if you're ahead or behind and then take action as necessary. So I'm going to open this dashboard, and you'll see it's rolling up for the Fox Hill development job. It's showing me how many tracking accounts are less than a quarter done, or a quarter to half, or half to three-quarters. So it gives me a sense of how far into the job I am. And then over here on the right, it's showing me how many tracking accounts are either ahead of where I said I should be based on the estimate, about on pace, or behind. And these nice heads-up displays, they also support drill down. So if I want to know, well, what 5 accounts are more than 25% behind, this is good to let me know I have good things and bad things, but what are the bad things? I click on the bar, and it drills down to show me these are the accounts: soldier piles, pipe, timber piles, geotextile, and then I can follow the data across. I can see my quantity performed to date. I can see the estimated man hours and the reported man hours and the delta between those two. And I could even continue to drill down. So I might say, well, what's going on in pipe? Why is it going so badly? I click on just that one tracking account, and the system will now run a new dashboard that isolates data within just this one tracking account. So it's a more detailed dashboard. It gives me some of the same information like quantities and hours, but it also gives me much greater detail. Things like units per man hour or man hours per unit. It'll also give me things like projected hours and cost at completion. So based on what I've done today, if I keep going at the same rate, this is where I'm going to end up, and I'm going to be way off. It even goes so far as to show me all of the field logs that went into making up that data. So I could find out, was it just one day? Was it one foreman? Was it in man hours? Was it an equipment cost or material cost? Where are we going wrong? So I know how to develop an action plan and get back on track. So we have a lot of these different reports. Here's another example. If I go back to the job itself, we have these graphic reports, but we also have text-based reports. So if you simply want to say, well, just show me how is the job doing, I could do a cost detail report. This is a little hard to see over a webinar. I'll make my screen a little larger. But this shows for the entire job, not just good and bad. It shows everything. It shows all the tracking accounts, percent complete, and then side by side it shows estimated and reported costs for each cost category, and then overall, and again, cost at completion. So it gives you a very detailed picture of where you are on the job. Also, if I go back to the home page, there's other dashboards and reports that allow you to see information over all the jobs at once. So this dashboard that was here at the very beginning is rolling up data from all of the jobs I'm working on. So I can see things at a glance, like a supervisor or an area manager. I could see, well, how many jobs does each project manager have? How many jobs haven't been assigned yet? What are my best jobs and my worst jobs? If I have 30 jobs that are going on at once, I don't want to have to go into each job individually. I want a heads-up display so I can focus my finite time on the problems. And again, these are all things that people do today, but the amount of work that they have to put in to get this kind of data out, taking those pieces of paper from the field, manually putting them into Excel, or getting all the different Excel files that people use in the field and putting them into some type of other tool, or waiting for accounting and getting the data out of accounting and trying to use those tea leaves to figure out what happens, those are all much, much more time intensive than simply having a tool like this that aggregates all the data for you. So these top-level dashboards, they also support drill down. I can do things like click on my worst job. It drills down and shows me the data inside the job. I could then go into the tracking accounts and continue to drill down all the way. So all the data is available in a very simple and meaningful way. The last thing that I'll tell you about those reports before I turn you back over to Mike for a quick wrap-up is that because we're built on a SQL database, it means that those reports can be customized. So back to one of the questions that someone asked about accessing custom fields, it's built on standard technology, on SQL and reporting services. So if your IT department has the skills to write reports like Crystal or Visual Studio, you can either change our reports or even build your own. So you don't have to go through us for custom reporting. You can also, as part of SQL, you could set up those reports to become subscriptions. So they simply get emailed to you every morning at 9 or every week at 5 p.m. or whatever you choose. So again, getting that data to you in a timely fashion, making it as simple as possible. So that's a good overview of some of the last few workflows. I'm now going to kind of turn it back over to Mike for a very quick wrap-up. Over to you, Mike.
Oh, thanks again, Tom. So again, why is it all important? So the ability to minimize the touch points and increase visibility between these functions is what can separate a company from the rest of the pack. So the passing of information between these points should be painless because it happens all the time. Every time a bid is won, every crew that's scheduled, every piece of equipment that breaks down, and every time card that's processed. So the important thing to remember is that everyone is working in the same system, analyzing the same data, and acting in unison can help assure efficiency, accuracy, and profitability. So that's all we really had today. If there's any more questions, I guess we'll open that up. If not, I'll turn it back over to Tom.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'll hover here for a moment, but I haven't seen any questions come in on the question panel. So if any folks have questions, go ahead and type them in now. While we're waiting for that, though, I would like to thank everyone for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to attend one of our webinars. Do keep an eye out for more webinars. B2W Software is always putting out new content and letting folks know what's happening. For any of you folks that looked at what you saw today and wanted to know more, do feel free to contact our sales department. They'll be happy to answer any questions. And if you want to see more information, they could even set up a personalized demonstration for you. Might be me. Also for clients, existing clients that maybe own some of the operations platform but not all, or if they own Estimate and don't own Track and they wanted to get more information about other elements, you can certainly call there. Even if you do own all the elements, maybe you saw some functionality that you didn't know the system could do, might be time for training, and you could call sales for a training quote, or you could also contact the support department for a quick question about how to turn on something or how something works. Also, as a reminder, for anyone that registered, even if you didn't attend, if you registered the session, we will send you an email link because the webinar has been recorded and will be available to watch probably several days later. But we'll download it and post it in a few days, and so you can watch it again. You can also let colleagues that weren't able to make it today, they'll be able to watch it as well. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. We will finish up the webinar. Thanks again for attending and hope to see you at future webinars.